A year on from Britain's last great goodbye, the Crown learned again that dates don't pass, they press. The nation stared, the air grew heavier, and every movement carried the weight of law. What unfolded wasn't a single procession, but 3 tracks running side by side. A future king walking straight into his grandmother's territory of trestle tables and lemon sponge, a reigning monarch and his consort disappearing into granite and prayer, and a younger son returning to the one room that has never demanded a performance to believe he means it. Around them spun victory and defeat on the rugby pitch, a country's grief tempered by habit, and a funeral announcement that reached back 3 centuries and quietly loosened a bolt in the old machinery. Nobody read the same script. Everybody wrote their own line. And in the pattern of those lines, the future of the monarchy showed itself, not as fireworks, but as discipline. The first step belonged to William, and it was chosen with surgical care. A solo visit to the Women's Institute at Sunningdale, on paper so plain you could miss it, in reality a signal flare fired straight into the memory of a woman who defined duty without noise. Elizabeth II joined the WI in wartime adolescence when ration books were sermons and common sense ran Britain better than most cabinets. She stuck with it for 8 decades, presiding over Sandringham meetings, as if they were state matters, because to her they were. That hall is where the monarchy breathes at human height, flower on cuffs, laughter in proper measure, questions asked without briefing notes. William walked in alone for a reason. No wife to soften the frame, no children to charm the lens, no elder to absorb the mythic charge. He offered himself without the safety rail, and let a room that never fawns tell him if he could stand. It wasn't nostalgia. It was apprenticeship. He didn't mimic his grandmother, he borrowed her grammar. Be ordinary convincingly and the country will believe you can be extraordinary when it hurts. The solo register mattered because the date did. Anniversary days can turn tributes into mausoleums if you grandly overplay them. William chose the opposite, a living wreath laid in conversation. A handshake is not a headline, a slice of cake is not a sermon, but together they say what gilded words cannot. That continuity doesn't belong to balconies and trumpets alone. The photographs looked gentle by design. A wooden chair, a polished floor, a corner of bunting, a future king leaning in with the tilt of the head that means go on. You can't fake that in a WI hall. They smell insincerity like a fire. The room passed him. So did the date. While that was happening, Balmoral spoke in the language it has always spoken to windswept kings, repetition. Charles and Camilla kept to the estate where grief is not staged but absorbed, where the late Queen's last hours turned walls into reliquaries. There were no speeches, no marble echoes, no official choreography beyond the walk from car to kirk. Crathy is the kind of parish that treats titled knees like any other, and that is precisely why the moment works. The King and Queen entered without theatre, and let the place do the talking, the same pew worn smooth by a century of Windsor elbows, the same hymn numbers that outlast headlines, the same granite sky that does not bend for crowns. To those addicted to spectacle, it looked like withdrawal. To those who listened, it was an answer. Duty can be public, but grief earns the right to be private. The late Queen mastered that balance. Charles, never a natural minimalist, made the smart choice to trust the house that shaped her best days and softened her worst nights. Let his son meet the public eye, he would keep the vigil that does not need one. The day even found its constitutional harmony. The Prime Minister, wife at his side, took a pew in that same church. There was no choreography beyond courtesy, but the picture did the old work, crown and government breathing in time, neither stealing the air from the other. That is the state's oldest duet. It rarely trends. It often steadies. In brittle years it matters more than a roar from a balcony. And then there was Harry, moving on his own rail, as he has done for years, true to a promise nobody can claim but him. The Well Child Awards are not convenient PR, they are his reflex. Long before memoirs and documentaries and the permanent fog machine of commentary, He stood on that stage to clap for courage, and to look families in the eye whose daily fight makes royal schedules look like a hobby. He returned again, as he always has. The people in that room do not care if the tabloids are calling him a traitor or a saint this week. They care that he shows up. In that hall, estrangement goes quiet because need is louder. For a few hours the noise that follows him shrinks to the size it deserves. He belongs there because the test is simple, sincerity or nothing, and he passes it. If Williams W.I. says, be ordinary well, and Charles S. Balmoral says, repeat the right, without explanation, Harry's Wellchild says, keep the promise you made when nobody's watching. The institution can't own that. It can only observe it, and, if wise, respect it. Life refused to stay in black and white. Rugby threw colour across the week like paint. Catherine, as RFU patron, stood in Brighton and watched England dismantle Australia with the kind of dominance that makes a stadium feel 10 degrees warmer. She applauded, leaned into the joy without overplaying it, and reminded an audience that often sees her under cathedral lighting that she is equally at ease under floodlights. William, as WRU patron, took his place at Exeter for Wales Fiji, and rode a match that turned and turned again before slipping away. She got the roar, he got the lesson he knows too well. Sometimes you hold the trophy and sometimes you hold the silence that helps other people swallow the loss. The monarchy could do worse than to study that split screen, 2 roles, 2 outcomes, same tone. The scoreboard doesn't grade royals. Steadiness does. Threaded through the living present was a whisper from the deep past that became, in a single line of palace prose, the week's most radical sentence. The Duchess of Kent's funeral would be held at Westminster Cathedral at 2 o'clock on the 16th. Kensington's private chapel would receive her first. Read that again and hear the hinge creak, Westminster Cathedral, not Abbey. Catholic rites for a Windsor, not as scandal, not as exceptions smuggled in a side door, but as the openly chosen farewell to a woman who converted in 1994, because conviction, not politics, told her where to stand. For 3 centuries, Rome and the Crown were the quarrel that refused to die. The Act of Settlement barred Catholics from the throne and punished heirs who married them. History layered suspicion over doctrine until the words, foreign allegiance, could ruin careers. And yet here, in the reign of a man who bears the title Supreme Governor of the Church of England, the sovereign will honor his aunt's conscience under mosaics that do not belong to Canterbury. It is not a revolution of law, the succession rules still stand where they stood. But it is an evolution of message, and messages are what monarchies live on. You could not stage a clearer answer to the question, what has changed, without rewriting a statute. To read the braid rightly is to refuse melodrama and still feel the pull. William didn't choose the WI to bask in gentle applause. He went to teach himself the room his grandmother trusted most. Charles didn't vanish into Balmoral's pine to avoid the nation. He chose the only house where private rights can be kept sacred without looking like indulgence. Harry didn't climb onto a charity stage because he needs cameras. He went because constancy is the last bridge he can cross without anyone else's permission. Catherine and William took sport and carried it with the grace that refuses to confuse luck with virtue. And the Duchess of Kent, in death as in life, made quiet conviction impossible to ignore. That is not a week of coincidence. It is a week of sentences the public is meant to read. The country did read them, especially the people who measure monarchs by tone, not trend. They saw a prince capable of standing without a safety rail, a king capable of letting a place do the speaking, a son capable of keeping faith when faith is the only credential he has left. They also saw 3 routes that do not meet yet. Every overlapping map brings the old question, will the brothers find an hour? This time the answer rested in diaries, hosts, security, the boring truths that quietly run royal life. Not this time is not always a verdict. Sometimes it really is a calendar. But absence accumulates. If you stack enough, not this time, end to end, they begin to look like policy. The family knows it. The public senses it. Repair, if it ever comes, won't be timed to anniversaries. It can't survive under a countdown. What does it amount to? More than the cynics allow, less than the romantics want. The monarchy is not a family drama for rent, it is a machine for meaning. Machines need maintenance. This was maintenance, done in small rooms, done in granite silence, done on a stage where a child's bravery makes everything else feel smaller. It said, the late queen is gone, but the habits that kept the roof up are still in use. It said, remembrance becomes idolatry if you refuse to breathe, we're breathing. It said, tradition can stretch without snapping, hear the hinge. By nightfall the files showed 3 chords, 1 day. William set the tone of a career that will be made or broken in rooms exactly like Sunningdale, where ordinary Britain decides if it recognizes you as useful. Charles and Camilla held a ritual without commentary, and let absence be eloquent. Harry wore no borrowed authority, and still filled a hall, because children do not give out applause for free. And waiting at week's end, a cathedral that has long been England's other mother church prepared to receive a duchess, whose requiem will tell an old nation a new thing. That conviction can be honored without panic, that law can stay while ritual bends, that the crown is not a museum piece, but a living object with joints that still move. The late Queen said grief is the price of love. The week proved that continuity is the rent on grief, paid daily, paid quietly, paid in rooms that don't need cameras to matter. The Windsors didn't speak in unison. They rarely do. But they did their work in 3 clean registers: Village Hall, Granite Pew, Charity Stage. If you want to know whether the monarchy still knows what it's for a year after losing its axis, don't wait for a grand statement. Look where they put their feet. Look who they asked to hold them up. Look where the prayers were said, and where the applause meant something. That is how this institution has always told its story when it is trying to get tomorrow right, not with a shout, but with a pattern you can feel before you can name.